Welcome to the Bite Pod, where we explore the latest in trade compliance, supply chain risk, and practical tools that help businesses of all sizes stay ahead. I'm your host, Ann Retho, and I'm thrilled to have you all here today. Today, we're diving into a topic that's close to the heart of many of our listeners: how small and mid-sized businesses can successfully manage trade compliance in a changing regulatory environment. I'm honored to be joined today by Kathleen Newell, the Trade Compliance Manager at the Massachusetts Export Center. Thanks for being here, Kathleen.
Thanks for having me, Anna. Really appreciate it.
We'll get into the details a little bit more, but just a bit of background on the Massachusetts Export Center. It's a powerhouse of support for exporters across Massachusetts. Kathleen brings decades of experience in international trade and has been instrumental in helping businesses grow globally while staying compliant with U.S. regulations. We'll be talking about the current trade landscape, tools, and practical steps businesses can take to get their programs off the ground or strengthen the ones they already have. Before we jump in, as always, a quick message about Byte. So, here at Byte, our mission is to simplify complex compliance challenges. Whether you're screening for restricted parties, navigating export regulations, or tracking evolving enforcement trends, Byte provides intuitive tools, AI-powered insights, and up-to-date data to help your team act fast and stay informed. So with that note, let's jump in and get into that detail I mentioned, Kathleen. Can you start by just giving us an overview? I know it'll be tough to summarize it all, but of what the Massachusetts Export Center does and its mission.
So the Massachusetts Export Center is part of the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center, a federal-state partnership funded by the U.S. Small Business Administration and the Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. The Export Center provides free one-to-one advisory services to Massachusetts businesses engaged in global trade, with a heavy focus on global trade operations and compliance. This includes a wide range of targeted, customized services to help Massachusetts businesses begin, expand, or enhance their export operations. Excuse me. Our services include technical assistance, such as export market identification and assessment, market entry strategies and channel development, logistics and supply chain management, and international payment and financing. And as mentioned, we do a lot with global trade regulatory compliance, including export control jurisdiction and classification assistance, and licensing determination support, screening and due diligence, export compliance program development, guidance on the full range of U.S. export controls and sanctions regulations. And I also want to mention one service in particular, which is our export compliance risk assessment, which provides an in-depth customized assessment of trade compliance risk throughout a company's operations. The risk assessment categorizes and provides customized, actionable feedback to businesses to prioritize and address their unique risks. Once the report is finalized, the Export Center can then work with the business to implement the recommendations identified in the assessment, which may also include the next step of guiding the company to build or enhance their export compliance program. So we have training programs as well. We have a variety of training programs on current trade-related topics affecting businesses. Our spring export training is posted to our website and is going on right now. A highlight event for us is our annual Export Expo, which is a virtual event featuring a lineup of workshops, panel discussions, and special addresses on a wide variety of export-related topics. The event also includes a virtual exhibit area featuring government, nonprofit, and private sector service providers serving the export community. I also want to mention the STEP grant. The Export Center works in collaboration with the Massachusetts Office of International Trade and Investment, or MOITI, to offer the State Trade Expansion Partnership Grant, or STEP grant. I know there are a lot of acronyms. The MOITI, through a grant through the U.S. Small Business Administration, provides grants to eligible approved Massachusetts small businesses for the purpose of increasing export sales. With regard to the grant, the Export Center works with businesses to identify eligible export development activities that they might apply for. We prepare companies for the competitiveness of the grant application through one-to-one communication and training via webinar, and we review the applications and provide feedback to MOITI. We also have a compliance alliance, which is also a great initiative. The Compliance Alliance is a special membership-based initiative which provides a forum for companies to connect and share best practices in the area of global trade compliance. Member benefits include conferences and training, which allow members to stay current on the latest trade compliance issues and receive updates on navigating complex global trade regulations. Members also benefit from free or discounted access to in-depth conferences and training programs featuring export practitioners, service providers, and government regulatory authorities. There are also benchmarking and networking activities which allow members to connect with their trade compliance peers for advice and sharing of best practices, including periodic compliance clinics and connecting with government regulatory authorities and decision makers. Members can also access members-only online resources, including a membership directory and a robust library of webinar archives and a wide variety of advanced compliance topics. This is a little bit about the Export Center. Massachusetts Export Center has a small team, but we are mighty, offering what I believe to be a wide range of comprehensive services for Massachusetts businesses involved in global trade. And that's just a little bit about the Export Center. I'm sorry, I kind of.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Like I said, it's hard to give an overview when there is so much that you do. So I think, these types of resources and you in particular, offer so much to the trade community. We want to make sure people are accessing everything that's available to them, especially kind of in these uncertain times, let's say. So just for everyone who's listening, know that resources are available and out there. And, even if it's something you don't offer, I'm sure you have, places to send people. But I'm not sure what you don't offer at this point.
Well, and that's exactly right. We partner with the commercial service locally to us. We share clients. We offer similar but not the same services. We obviously work with the state trade office, the MOID. We work with the SBA, SCORE, sharing clients with them. So if there's a service that we don't offer, we have the knowledge of who to connect companies with. So that's really important. And it may be that a company needs to speak with an attorney or a consultant, depending upon what the issue is. It's because we can provide guidance to a company. We can't do it for them. We can't create their compliance program for them, for example, right?
Yeah.
We can provide them with the information, they can do it well, but we can't do it for them. So in that sense, we may refer them to an attorney, a consultant that may be able to actually do that work for them. And we do have that kind of those contacts as well in our database for them.
Yeah, that's great. And going back to your Export Expo, it sounds like you got some background, or I know you know it already, but what did you learn there? Like, what are the changes that we're seeing in trade policy and enforcement? What's on the horizon for this year, and what are you foreseeing as some of the biggest compliance challenges?
Well, what I will say is that, last week I was actually at BIS
Oh,
Update
yeah.
Conference, and Secretary Lutnick opened the event during the plenary session, and he had a focus on, increase in enforcement efforts, greater fines and for violations. And so this is really going to call for heightened due diligence from efforts from companies, which has already been in place, but I think it's going to be even more important as new regulations come out. China is still a focus. We're looking, with technology, making sure certain technologies don't get to China. There are a lot of controls, and I really don't want to go too much into that. But also looking at the diversion risk of goods to China, Iran, and elsewhere. Russia controls will be expanded or possibly reduced depending upon the outcome of the Ukraine war. And additionally, you may be familiar with the America First Trade Policy Memorandum that was released in January, where President Trump called on his cabinet members to come together, cooperate, and analyze, assess kind of the regulatory policies that are in place. So part of what he was looking for was trying to eliminate loopholes in regulatory controls, and reassessing trade agreements, possibly maybe even incorporating trade controls within the trade agreements, with renegotiation of these agreements. And also, I know with the emerging technology controls, there have been added ECCNs, added exceptions, and expansion on the foreign direct product rules. Additionally, the red flag indicators that list has grown, focusing on technology and foreign direct product rules, et cetera. Um, and I think the biggest challenge with keeping up with regulatory changes is deciphering them, and being able to act on them quickly enough, and conducting the appropriate amount of due diligence to avoid compliance, because you never really know how much is enough and
Yeah,
harassment. So it's really going to be important to know your customer, know your customer's customer, to prevent diversion, et cetera. Understand your supply chain, both for origin purposes with the tariffs, but also for forced labor issues and other issues. So it's really going to be important to understand all aspects of your customers, your supply chain, and have that information, have procedures in place to conduct that due diligence and have that information handy.
definitely. Yeah. That's good advice. And kind of along the same lines, for companies who are looking to formalize their trade compliance efforts or who listen today and think, "Oh no, I'm not ready for what's coming." What are the first steps that they should take? And, if you can give a few just key elements of like what makes a strong compliance program.
Sure. So first step that I would take in developing a trade compliance program is pulling together a compliance team made up of, or led by the compliance professional, the compliance manager within the company, but also bringing in personnel from each department. So finance, sales, order management, shipping, HR, engineering, all of these departments and more have a hand in understanding what compliance aspects might affect their business and their shipments, their sales. So bring that team together, discuss what trade compliance is and why it's important, and they're kind of liaisons, I guess, with from the compliance team to their departments to kind of relay that information to the departments on why this is important, what procedures we need to put in place, what areas we need to look at. So that's one of the first things I would say. I would also say that you need management commitment to create this compliance program, management buy-in. So I'm going to talk about this in one second, but they need to be backing this compliance program for a couple of reasons. But in this instance, because it's time consuming. It's a lot of work to pull together a compliance program. A compliance program is not a requirement. It's not a legal requirement for a company to have, though it is a mitigating factor if a company should come up with a violation. So it's important to have. So because of the time that it takes to actually complete a compliance program, the first draft anyway, I would say create an outline of the procedures you have in place, just a quick outline, so you have something that you can build on and that your team can kind of help you, compliance team can help you put that together. Excuse me. I would also say then, take all the procedures that each department has, review the procedures, find the gaps, and just start plugging in the information that the departments need to incorporate to maintain compliance. And again, maybe it's not in a formal compliance program yet, but that information can be being relayed to the departments as you go on. And so from there, I mentioned very importantly, you need to have management commitment. And when you look at the elements of an export compliance program, for example, under the BIS, you typically see a letter saying, you just have your management, your CEO, whomever, sign this letter saying, we think we should commit to having a compliance program. That's not enough. It's great to have that, but you need buy-in. Your management needs to buy into the importance of trade compliance. Relay the importance of compliance company-wide, the ramifications for non-compliance on the company and individual employees within the company. Excuse me. Management also needs to dedicate resources for training, for screening screening subscriptions or whatever is necessary to actually maintain compliance. And that will look different from every company, from company to company. And so I should also say that A compliance program, there's no template for it, right? That the information that, for example, BIS has on their website about developing a trade compliance program is very broad. It doesn't mean a company has to address every element of that trade compliance that template, that information they provide, because it's not going to affect every company. So there's no template for this. Trade compliance program is based on every individual company. And so you just need to take a look at what aspects of the program affects your business. Um, so we already mentioned, identifying the gaps in compliance, looking at your procedures and take steps to close that gaps. You also need to look then at the export authorizations, determining what the outline how to determine jurisdiction of the products. Outline how classifications were determined. How did you come to the determination of an ECCN or the category under a DDTC under the USML? Excuse me. Outline that information and provide that. Outline screening procedures, everything that is necessary for employees to understand what it means to determine export licensing requirements. Create a table that outlines this information, because a lot of times when for a compliance professional to look at the Commerce Control List and the regulations and understand how to determine if a license is required, that's one thing. But to have an employee in shipping or finance or sales take a look at those regulations, they're not going to understand it as easily. So create a table, what your products are, what your classifications are, what the reasons for control are, and countries that you should not be exporting because of these reasons of control and the classifications. So that's going to be really important too. That doesn't mention screening, the screen aspect of determining licensing, but having that table in place will at least let employees know, okay, I need to be careful of this. It's not something I can move ahead with, or I need to reach out to my compliance manager. Training is really important, very important, probably the most important part of your compliance program, I would say. You need to have dedicated training for your compliance manager with BIS training, or very specific training about regulatory compliance. And then they should also then train employees within the company, specific to their roles within the company. So HR manager will have a role about, hiring and I-9 forms, and for foreign
Right.
nationals. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
losing
Yeah.
my words. For foreign nationals, not that they can't be hired, but just to understand what a company needs to do to maintain those boundaries from areas that that individual might be restricted from. So that HR person, for example, needs specific training on that. Sales needs specific training on that, screening before you agree to sell to the company, and before you tell, your manufacturer that, yes, we're going to sell to this company. There needs to be certain training in place individually for each department, so they know what they're looking for. Customer service, for example, is another important one. Require this training on a regular basis, and track the training by employee. So they should have so many hours. And the reason for this is just not only to as a refresher for the information, but the information changes. So employees need to be aware of the changes that are happening in the regulations, so they know what to report back to their compliance manager, or whomever is going to be handling any due diligence with that. Also knowing how to handle visits from enforcement agents. So, training for reception, not to provide too many details, and not to say, sure, why don't you go speak with the shipping department? I have no problem with that. Put them in contact with the appropriate management personnel. Name those within your compliance program, name the specific people, first, second, and third tier of people that enforcement agents should be speaking with. Be cooperative with the enforcement agents, not providing too much information. And typically, the enforcement agents will require records from the past 5 years or so within the next 24 hours. So you don't necessarily have to provide the information to them on the spot. So 24 hours, and then once the enforcement agents have left the office, call your attorney. Let them know what's happening so they can help you through the process. And then, reporting violations is really important. First, identifying the violation, right? And bringing it to the attention of the appropriate personnel. But then the practice on reporting the violations, sending in a voluntary self-disclosure. How is that going to happen? Are you going to have an attorney come in and help you write that? What changes, need to define what has happened, the changes that you're going to be making so it doesn't happen again, and maybe have an attorney help you write that up to submit that. Also looking at record keeping. You need to keep track of, I think I mentioned before, classification determinations, order and shipment information such as POs, sales agreements, communications between the buyer and seller and forwarder, for example, export documentation, electronic export information, your ITN number, airway bill of lading, export licenses, distribution contracts, letters of credit, carnets. All of that information needs to be kept on file for a minimum of five years, although it should be noted that OFAC's statute of limitations has increased to 10 years. So if you have any shipment, any goods that have been shipped under a general license with OFAC, that has to be 10 years. Specify which documents you need to maintain in your compliance program, where they should be maintained, who maintains them. Be very specific in outlining that information. And you should also maybe have a procedure in place for purging those records. So you don't have anything over 5 years or 10 years now as far as the OFAC licensing is required. But have kind of a procedure in place for purging old records. And then audits. Once you have procedures in place, conduct a yearly or biannually conduct an audit. Maybe the first year might be an internal audit, and then the next time might be an external audit, so it's not so biased. And conducting an audit, not that it's so biased, but not that it's biased. So it's and when you have an internal audit, obviously you're looking at certain things. So yep, that's fine, that's fine. An external audit is an outside person, probably more aligned to what an enforcement agent would see if they were looking at the information. So that's why it's important. And make updates to your compliance program based on those audits. And you want to create the audit report, share the findings with management and departments that may need to have some corrective actions. Follow the corrective actions and audit again those areas to make sure that they actually have been put in place. Create an addendum to the audit, providing to the original report and outlining those corrective actions that have been made. I can't enforce enough, or I can't say enough how strongly that it's important to specify names, titles, compliance personnel, and your compliance team, names, contacts, all that information in your compliance program. So there's no question when someone needs to reach out to a key person that they know who they're reaching out to. So that'll be really important in a compliance program. And it's a living document. It should not be, something that a new employee receives a 3-ring binder when they walk in the door and they put it up on their shelf, which happens. It happens.
Yeah.
Right? But it's a living document. Regulations change. It needs to be updated easily and employees notified easily. So an intranet, if possible, is the best way to host your compliance program. So that's probably my best
Yeah,
advice.
that's a great way to kind of word it, right? Like it's not a compliance document or, SOPs. It's a living hosted compliance program that needs, new life, pretty regularly between staff turnover, new regulations, all of that, and then add in auditing and everything. So yeah, I can imagine that takes a lot of upkeep.
Well, it's so much easier, if a regulation changes, right? You have a notice of proposed regulation change. You can address it. You can update your compliance program if it's on an intranet or something shared by your company, and then send an email out, hey, this change has happened, right? So everyone is notified. It's a lot easier than, keeping a paper in a notebook and
Yeah.
letting people know about it. So
And kind of along those lines, you talked a lot about like document organization as well. And we've mentioned a lot of resources for listeners and where they can go and between you and BIS and all of that. In terms of like tools available to help either with their program development or program kind of auditing or just ongoing the living program, like what tools are there for people or what do you see people using? Is it just like a Google Drive or is that, um,
clients I've worked with have had it on an intranet
Mhm.
or they have it on a shared network,
Yeah,
literally files on a shared network, which is, I guess, better than, a three-ring binder up on someone's
yeah.
shelf. But this client in particular that I'm thinking of, it was a very extensive
Hmm.
section of their network where they house their compliance program. So I don't think because it depends on the size of the company, right? This
Yeah.
particular company, I think there may be 10 people in the company.
Mm.
And when I first started working with them, there were maybe 5 people in the company. Um, and so over the years, it's grown and it does a lot of business internationally. And they're also very technologically minded. So I think for them, what worked best for their small group was to have this on an internal network, not an intranet. It's not exactly the same, but literally, your network that you have on your computer that you share files with.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
works based
Okay.
on the size of your company. It's not one size fits all.
Yeah. Yeah, I really liked, I wanted to touch on that as well. Just, like you said, it's a template is offered, but for people like me who I like to know the answer, right? Like tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. But I think there's kind of more of like a creativity that goes into this in terms of, making it work for your company and what your company needs.
Well, and that's another part of, having that compliance team together because
Hmm.
they get to see kind of how what they do interacts with what the other department does, right? First of all. And you may have a procedure in place or want to implement a procedure or some, covering some area of risk. And the next department says, well, that doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for my department downstream, right? So yeah, it is kind of creative. It is something you do have to create from the ground up. You have this guidance, but it's kind of, I'll say, almost even cathartic to kind of pull this together, to pull your group together, to pull the departments together, to understand that literally every department in some manner touches some area of risk related to international trade.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been doing a lot of outreach lately on the Bite team and talking to those different touch points around compliance. So we've talked to product owners and we've talked to sales operations associates and really trying to understand kind of how compliance touches their role. And we've gotten very mixed feedback. And so it's interesting, it makes me think kind of like going back and thinking, maybe they're just not the sales operations associate, and that's fine, right? Or if maybe, some of these companies may be needing to develop this team that you're referring to that's a little bit more cross-functional.
Hmm.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just and especially with distributors, overseas employees or distributors really need to understand how they're affected by this, right? So we talked to a lot of different companies that their distributors don't understand why they have responsibility to U.S. export controls. And it's because they're your partner, they're an arm of the manufacturing company here in the United States.
Mhm.
So if they don't comply with U.S. export controls, handling U.S. product, and of course, we have all the foreign direct
Right.
product rules and everything now. So that's a whole other aspect, right? But if they don't understand their role in handling U.S. product and who they resell to, right? Then they shouldn't be a distributor for you. So
Yeah.
you really need to drive that home, provide training for the distributor. So overseas employees, really, it's really important that they understand the
Wow.
environment.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I feel like you've given so much. If someone takes notes, then they can step through how to create their compliance program. So thank you so much, Kathleen. Before we wrap up, I like to ask, whoever we're talking to, what's the one piece of advice that you would give either to our listeners or to small businesses in general who are looking to improve their trade compliance this year?
I think I have a couple pieces of advice, but I think my biggest piece of advice is don't be complacent. Don't close your doors, close your walls, and think that you're alone in this. Participate in groups and industry associations, compliance alliance, reach out to services like the SBDCs, like the Export Center, other organizations such as SCORE, Women in World Trade, the veterans associations, etc. They offer free services. And so this is really important for small businesses that may not have the resources to join some of these bigger organizations, right? um, but reach out, hear from other compliance professionals or other businesses that are doing global business to understand what they're having to address, how they're addressing it. And it'll really give you insight as far as what you should be doing with your own business and how to do it appropriately. So don't be your own silo. Don't close yourself off and think, I have this, I got this. There's so much more out there and so much is changing. Communicate with others that are in the same role. I think is very important. Um,
Yeah, and you mentioned Women in World Trade, which I'm a member of, and that community is so amazing. The monthly meetups, and I actually ran into a few people the other day at another event, so that's a great resource. And then also, I know, Kathleen, we've met before at the ICPA event, so BITE has started the New England or Boston, we invite everyone from New England. But you don't have to be an ICPA member to go to those events. And so it's a networking opportunity. There are speakers. So I think also, just echoing, I know for you guys too, like you don't have to be a member necessarily of these networks. So if you are a small team or if you're an individual who's just trying to gain exposure, have someone else to talk to, reach out to these networks for sure. Because even if you can't join the membership, there's still opportunities available, I think, for people.
Absolutely. And reach out to the Export Center, right? If I can't provide you with actual in-depth advising and give you some information and provide you with other details of other contacts. So I think that's important. I think it's
Yeah.
important.
And I know you said you had a few pieces of advice. Any
Well,
others you could share?
the other thing I would say, especially in the this current regulatory environment, is be prepared for new regulations to come out. Check the Federal Register notes often. Have a plan A, B, C, and D, and have all personnel. Have again your team on standby. That if a new rule comes out, that they are already starting in the works to help prepare for when it becomes a rule. So as soon as it's announced, you should be working to identify the rule, how it affects the business, and how to implement changes within the company to comply with that regulation. And I would also say it's really important when you see these regulations come out, or the advanced notice of rulemaking, advanced notice of proposed new rulemaking. I'm sorry. When you see these ANPRMs come out, comment on them. Provide comment because BIS works on this information, and we were actually reminded of this at BIS update last week. They, for example, received one comment on a rule that was proposed,
Wow.
and so they acted on it. They acted on that rule, and then after the rule took effect, companies were like, "Well, wait a minute, you didn't
What
submit,
happened? We didn't
you
know
didn't
this
submit
was going
comments."
to happen.
So submit comments, even if it's like, this rule is fantastic. I think this is great. Or, this is really going to affect my business.
Mhm.
I won't be able to do business because, there are other suppliers of these same products or, whatever the instance is. But submit comments, submit public comments to BIS so they know how it affects your business, and how they can try to create a regulation that works for everyone.
That's great. Yeah, I think, just keeping the lines of communication open, whether it's with other compliance professionals or in opportunities where you are able to touch with the policy side of things. Stay engaged. I think
Stay
that's very
engaged.
important. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
especially right now, it's very important.
yeah, definitely. Any final thoughts, Kathleen?
Just, there are plenty of resources out there for companies that they know where to look. So there are the SBDC, Small Business Development Centers, of which we're a part of. If you're in Massachusetts, by all means, give us a call, reach out to the Massachusetts Export Center. Anyway, if there's something we can do to help you, again, I can point you in the right direction. Commercial service, offers a lot of great services. SCORE, part of the SBA, offers great services. So reach out to some of these, services that can help businesses, our low or no cost services, and let us see what we can do to help your company grow.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. So Kathleen, again, thank you so much for sharing your insight and trade compliance, and also so much information about the Massachusetts Export Center. I feel like it may be an underutilized resource. So hopefully you'll get a lot of people coming to you. What you do in supporting small businesses is unmatched. If you are a business looking to improve your compliance processes or expand globally, hopefully today's conversation offered some great takeaways, from the importance of getting fundamentals right to leveraging tools and staying ahead of regulatory changes. As mentioned, you can find more resources, tools, and updates at bytedata.io. And don't forget to subscribe to the Byte Pod wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you.